Thank you so much, Sean, for that introduction. And what's up to everybody who's tuning in? Thank you for joining us. It's really an honor to be doing this for Joe's Blackbook, which does such great stuff for supporting young people who have a passion for design. One of the cool things about this particular chat is that a portion of your donations are going to go to Creatives Want Change. In addition to the Joe's Blackbook Scholarship, Creatives Want Change is a nonprofit dedicated to the cultivation of Black creative talent, beginning at the high school level and continuing through early professional development. So that's pretty cool. And, I'm super excited to be talking with Willy. Willy, you are just an outstanding designer and an incredible person. Everything you do is dope, from the clothes you make to the runway shows that you put on to the sort of concepts and ideas behind the fashion that take it to another level, whether it's talking about climate change or racial oppression in society. So we're going to talk about a little bit of everything that you do today, from the work of your namesake label to the cool collaborations you do, to also designing behind the scenes for brands like Ralph Lauren and Yeezy. But first, to start it off, I think it'd be cool to take it back a little bit. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you grew up, the sort of community you came from, and how your early life sort of shaped your ideas about style and fashion.
Sure. Well, first of all, it's an honor to be doing this with you, and thanks guys for having me. I really am appreciative, and I love everything about Joe's Blackbook and what we're doing here. And Will, of course, you're a friend, so I love sitting down and talking with you for sure. So for me, fashion, growing up, I didn't really grow up in a fashion environment by any means. The town that I grew up in California, it's called Huron. It's a very, very small Mexican town, and people are more concerned with putting food on the plate than they are with like fashion. There was no kind of they didn't have like Harper's Bazaar or anything like that available to look at. And then as I got a little bit older, we moved to like a slightly larger town, still in the San Joaquin Valley, that was more integrated with white people. And I'm half white and half Mexican, so I was kind of an anomaly in this little Mexican town that I grew up in. And moving to that larger town kind of opened my eyes a bit to other cultures. And I was able to see preppy and some other things that I hadn't seen before. And I actually loved how they mixed with the more Chicano influences that I had seen growing up. So I always had my eye on this kind of stuff. And because it was a small town and it was, very rural, I was kind of outside of the box from a very early age. I found myself not identifying with what, everybody else was identifying with. So I really took myself into this world of like otherworldliness. And that's where I really developed my creative mind and my thought processes and my passions for things that were visual and beautiful and, not part of what I was seeing around me. So all of that really, really led to me being finding a career path in a creative field, because when I got to a point where I was able to, get a job and realize that there are ways to make money and sustain yourself with creativity, I was, super excited about that. And I went, all in.
That's dope. When you first started to recognize that you had this passion for creative expression and design, was that nurtured in your community? Was it supported? How did you continue to move along that pathway?
Well, because it wasn't necessarily nurtured in the community I was in, I really, it almost worked to my advantage, because I created this world that I was kind of mentioning, where I was like building these things in my mind that were really not part of what was around me. And I always joke about this thing that I did when I was a really little kid, like, 4 or 5 years old. There would be address books that you could buy in the store, little address books. And I always thought like those were for drawing dresses. And so my mom would buy me these address books and I would just sketch little dresses in them. It's so funny. I wish we still had those. It'd be amazing. But my mind was already going down the path of seeing things through the lens of what people wore.
Mm-hmm.
And as I got older, I really started to fall in love with what people wore, not necessarily as fashion, like, fashion, but as a way to present themselves and, show their identities through the apparel they wore. And that's why I've always loved Chicano culture and the way that cholos have dressed, because it was such a clear sign of showing identity and, showing self-identity for people whose land had been, taken over the years. And it was such a beautiful and dignified way of taking like workwear apparel, cheap Dickies, things that, we bought at Kmart, and just making it look so beautiful. And I think that's when I really fell in love with apparel being worn as not something so fantastical, so otherworldly, but as an expression of who we really are, or who a people really is, whether it's cholos or whether it's even skinheads. I'm not a skinhead supporter by any means, but there's a good look going on there. Subcultures taking clothing and making it their own.
Absolutely. When do you think was the first time you started to really learn about the craft of making clothes?
Well, I was, I for a while I thought I was going to be like a graphic artist, because that was the one thing that that was the first thing I saw that maybe I can do this and make money from. But I ended up getting a job in San Francisco when I was pretty young, in the stock room. And that's when I really started to see that there was like this apparel industry. And I was working with Nick Graham, who I eventually became friends with. And I was seeing that, okay, this is really cool. We can make these styles and sell them, and it's a profitable business. So I started there in the stock room, just packing and shipping. And I eventually, just really focused on what I wanted and got to start interfacing with the designers there eventually. And then I was able to show some of my work, and then I got a little, internship within the company. And eventually it led to me working with the apparel and designing with the team there. And that was really my first hands-on apparel experience. And from there, it was just, I was like, this is great. I love it. This is what I want to do.
That's awesome. You talk about showing some of your work. Can you tell me a little bit about what it is that you actually showed them? And then also, what is the kind of things that you were doing in your internship just getting going?
Yeah. So it was really, I was paying attention to what the designers were doing, even without them noticing. I was doing a lot of like after hours work after I was packing and shipping. I'd, just kind of sit around, observe, and see what was going on. And then I would start producing ideas like sketches, or we were doing boxer shorts at the time with novelty prints. So I was just coming up with novelty prints and presenting them really nicely and sharing them with some of the people that worked there. And it eventually got noticed, and they were like, okay, this guy's like, he knows something about what's going on. I think we can give him a chance. And then for the early internship phase, I was basically cutting and pasting. I mean, this is in the late 80s. So we were literally like cutting and pasting to lay out a print, and then photocopying it and faxing it to, someplace in China. But, I was very low level, emptying ashtrays. I was actually emptying ashtrays for like my boss, Nick. who was chain smoking. But, you know, it was a chance to really get in there and see what was going on. And that's one thing I tell anybody I'm talking to who's like looking for a career in fashion or, you know, young, getting started out, like starting at the bottom with an internship is the best thing you can do. And I always think it's great to do an internship with a smaller company. Like my company, you know, it's on the smaller side, and we love working with the interns because they learn so much. They do every aspect of the business. They learn it in and out, and they learn like the hardcore way of doing it. And then I think it's also a good idea to do an internship with a large company if you have that opportunity, even if you want to start your own brand, because there's so much to learn within a large company. You know, there's so many facets of a large business that the best way you can do it is to just get in the door somehow and do whatever you can just to be in there.
So with that, how did you get in the door at Ralph Lauren, and what was that sort of experience like?
So, you know, it's like there's this certain percentage of luck that happens in your life, and then there's this other percentage of will and drive and what you make happen. And I think the more that you persevere and the more that you push the will, the closer you get to these little lucky opportunities happening. So that said, I got a job with a cycling apparel company, and I was living in California, and there wasn't much going on out there. It was a small town on the coast of California. It was like around Pismo Beach, if anybody's ever heard of that. And there was a cycling apparel company working there. So I got a job there, and I literally didn't even know how to turn on the computer my first day because I had taken a break from school and things had progressed so much that I was like, okay, this isn't like cut and paste anymore. But, you know, I faked it until I made it, so to speak. And Ralph Lauren ended up doing RLX, which was the athletic line, you know, back in like early 90s. And they were contracting out to different like athletic apparel companies to help them do that stuff. And I happened to be at this cycling apparel company. And at the time I was wearing like all polo sport, head to toe. And I was like, okay, I got this. I am going to do this. And I started working with Ralph Lauren, and, you know, they didn't really have the support on their end to do everything that was needed. So they were just giving me more and more work. And they ended up coming out a few times to work with this cycling apparel company I was with. And we interfaced and we met, and that was my opportunity. They brought me to New York to do RLX. And then I was in New York, and I was at Ralph Lauren, and I was like, oh my God, what is this? Did this really happen? You know, and I was scared and I was nervous, and I hated it for the first like few months because I was so like overwhelmed. But I stuck it out, and eventually I became the senior designer of print and pattern for all men's divisions. So yeah, it was an amazing opportunity. And yeah, I was terrified, and I felt really out of place because coming from, you know, Huron, California, I was really not in my element. And I you know, I fought a lot of anxiety and I fought a lot of fears, and I really worked to overcome those things, to make myself believe that I belonged there just as much as anybody else that was there. And I ended up doing a great job, you know, and I just proceeded to go up in my career from there.
Are there any things that, you know, you can advise people who are tuning in, who are like young people of color, or maybe coming from marginalized communities or underrepresented communities, who step into the corporate space and they recognize that they're one of the few or one of the only ones there. What are some things specifically that you experienced at Ralph Lauren or learned at Ralph Lauren to help you learn the way to navigate those situations?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is the fact that people of color have to work a little bit harder, and that's just the way it is. You know, we have to be on point just a little bit more. So I think it's important to keep that in mind so that we don't slack off. And then another thing I wanted to bring up, it ties back to that anxiety thing I was just talking about. It's that I know people don't really talk about this a lot, but I think that people of color or people who are from smaller communities or people who don't really feel like they have a reason or a place to be like with a big fashion brand or be a great designer, there's an anxiety that comes along with that. And I think that learning to deal with that anxiety and to treat that anxiety as a friend and let that motivate you and let that encourage you to be stronger and better. I think that will help people of color to realize that our place is just as valid as anybody else's. You know, because taking leaps means dealing with anxiety. The more exciting things you want to do with your life, the larger challenges that you want to take, the more anxiety you're going to have with that. And the more you are able to deal with that as a friend and let that motivate you, the better it will serve you in the long run.
You know, you talk about anxiety and pressure, you know, going from your experience designing with companies like Ralph Lauren and American Eagle to having your own retail space. Can you talk about what sort of made you want to transition and open up your own store, and how did that fit into your trajectory and your growth and your overall evolution with, and I'm talking about Palmer Trading Company.
Yeah. So, you know, I've been working with vintage quite a bit. And I was working with at Ralph Lauren and American Eagle Outfitters at a time when like vintage was kind of a new-ish thing, at least for mass market, you know, like making clothes with holes in it and little torn collars. All of that was kind of a new concept. So believe it or not. So I was collecting a lot of vintage and studying vintage and, you know, really, I mean, I always preferred vintage shopping for myself, just because, you know, it was cooler, but really falling in love with like old things from the 1920s and just vintage itself. So I started this collection. I was really falling in love with it. And then my husband and I had all this stuff that we loved, and we were like, you know, let's try to open a store. And yeah, it was you know, it was major. It was major. It was not easy, so much harder than we expected it to be, but we stuck it out. I think for 10 years we had the store, Palmer Trading Company, and it really led to a lot of learning and a lot of connections, really, because in that store, I started making shirts, doing a lot of US made stuff, which is great. If you're like starting out as a new designer, I think it's really wonderful to make things locally. It's easier. You know, your quantities won't have to be as large, and it's less of a footprint on the world. You know, you're not shipping from China to somewhere else. You're just kind of making locally. But that's what we're doing, and I was able to connect with Journal Standard Japan because they took a liking to the clothes we were making. So we started making clothes for them. And then I, you know, had contacts with Japanese distributors, and then I started distributing in Japan. And that's kind of how I started growing my own business, was through there.
And when you started your namesake brand, was there a moment where you kind of pulled back and decided, okay, I'm going to figure out, you know, the ethos, the ideas? Like, was it really planned and thought out before you said, okay, here is the Willy brand, or was it kind of just evolution?
It was evolution. It really was. I By the time I launched the Willy brand, I had great experience from Ralph Lauren, great experience from American Eagle Outfitters, great experience from having my own store, great experience from interning at Joe Boxer. You know, it was a culmination of all this experience, and I felt like, okay, well, this is the chance to try something new. And I had the connection with Journal Standard. So the first thing I ever did, it wasn't even like a big release of the brand. It was just a small collection for Journal Standard. And it performed well there. So they wanted to order more. And then a distributor in Japan wanted to order more. So I was like, okay, this is the moment I can actually do my own brand, because Palmer Trading was very much it was something that was popular. I was catering to a popular thing in the world. You know, it was at the dawn. It was with Heritage and Americana. All of that was like at its prime. So I was really catering to that. And when I did Willy Chavarria, I was like, okay, if I can do all that, then I'm going to try to do what is from the heart, what I've always really wanted to do, and what's just like a complete expression of myself. And I took that risk, and it was, it's been okay. It's been okay. So I'm really glad I did that.
When do you think, like, at what point do you think you really sort of were able to put all of yourself into your brand and really make it just kind of this complete representation of not just, your technical knowledge, but also your identity and things like that?
Well, when I started the brand, it was every bit of it was that. I when I started the brand, I knew that this brand is going to be a complete creative expression. It's going to be linked to my politics, and it's going to be a brand that will help to serve for the better of the world. And I have two guys on my team at the time, and we were all totally in sync with that. And that has always been like the fundamental base of the brand itself. So in that, we make an effort to do everything we can to give back to the world in what we do. It's not always easy, and if you're starting out as a new brand, something to keep in mind is you got to have your own feet really solid on the ground before you can help out elsewhere. It's kind of like that thing where if you're on a plane and it starts to crash and the oxygen comes, you got to put it on yourself before the child or whatever. It's kind of like that. Like, you really have to have your stuff together before you can really help others. But that's always been a fundamental part of the brand. And as soon as we've been able to, we've made efforts to partner with other organizations or other people with same philosophies that will help to cross benefit one another.
One of the things I think that's so powerful with your brand are the graphics. When you talk about these ideas, political ideas about climate change, ideas about, masculinity, gender, sexual preference in society. Can you talk a little bit about where these graphics come from for you and how important they are in terms of the identity of what you do?
Yeah, it's very much a part of the expression of the brand and how I see the opportunity of having a business, in my case, a fashion business, but it could really be any kind of business where you are allowing your voice to be heard through your artistic expression. And now more than ever, we see that being so incredibly valid. And when we first started the brand and we were making bold statements about kids in cages or racial issues. It was a little more of, it was stirring a little more feathers. But now I think we all see that it's just imperative in anything we do. If you're not thinking politically, you're really not thinking, because if we're here living in the United States, or living anywhere really, anything we do is affected by politics. So I think that it's an honor and a privilege to be able to use our voices through what we create, and
Yeah.
and I think that it's something to really aspire to, and it's something really cool about being in the world, a creative world, where we're able to utilize our message through what we do.
One of the great things about your brand are the runway shows that you put on. The cruising show in particular was one of the most incredible fashion shows that I've ever attended. Just in terms of location, the way it connected with the style. How important is it to invest in putting on shows like that for a brand that's starting out? And also, as the world continues to change, we're dealing with the pandemic, we're dealing with New York Fashion Week being a little different. How are you looking at fashion shows going forward?
Okay, so things have changed so much in the last 4 or 5 months with regard to that. And, fashion shows, I love them because they're drama and their excitement and their theater, and they are such a great way to release the creative expression. But they're extremely costly, they're extremely wasteful, and for someone starting out, they're totally not necessary. And now that everything has shifted to digital, and we've got like this new wave of creativity, so many young people are coming in with like brilliant ideas and a whole new philosophy and how they see fashion. um, I think that seasons are becoming obsolete, and doing a big show once a season is becoming obsolete. I didn't do anything for this spring 21 thing. I'm gonna do something cool in November, just because that's when I'm gonna have the time and the money, and everything's gonna be in the right place to do it. So I think there are more interesting, creative ways to deliver the message and to network with either press or other organizations, where you can get the message out without necessarily like spending a fortune on a space and inviting all of the writers, except you, of course, to come and check it out.
Yeah. I mean, one of the other cool things I think is so special about your brand is your silhouettes and the way that they're so unique and always kind of pushing boundaries. I'm wondering, as you produce your clothes, is that one of the challenges that you find in terms of your production, like being able to get the unique cut of t-shirts and the unique shape of a bomber jacket or a hoodie or a pair of flared pants to really be what you want it to be? Is that a challenge that you face? And how do you get garments that on the surface might be like a normal menswear item, but actually is very, very different from anything else that's on the market?
Yeah, well, it depends on the budget, because if I've got like a great pattern maker to work with and a great tech designer to work with, and I can build out a tech pack and pass it off to someone to duplicate, then it's on point. But don't always have that budget. So the best thing to do is work with the factory. So if your factory's local, it's great. You can go there and you can work one-on-one, and oftentimes the factory is going to have a pattern maker on hand, and you can work together with them. Maybe you bring in a reference sample, you pin it up, you really talk through what's going on along with your sketch and your tech pack, and it can be understood. So But with the shutdown, normally I go to Peru to work with my factories, but I haven't been able to go there. So there's been a lot of, sending sketches and a lot of Zoom calls and a lot of things coming back really like jacked up that need to be redone. But overall, I think that once you've developed a good relationship with a factory, which I think is very important to stick with somebody and, really working together, you're building business together. Once you've developed that relationship, they start to get it and they start to understand you more and more. So everything you're creating, it starts to become easier for them to understand.
Mm-hmm. One of the cool things that you're doing is, in addition to your mainline collection, you're working in collaboration and doing stuff with, K-Swiss, Hummel. That's one side of it. And on the other side, you're also working behind the scenes, sometimes with brands like Yeezy. Can you talk about those two different relationships and how they fit into the overall business that you're running?
Yeah. So the K-Swiss and Hummel and Kansas and other brands that I do collaborations with, it's actually really cool that the way I've approached this. And it works for my brand and their brand. So my brand philosophy is to make sure that we're doing something cool for the world. So in the case of Hummel, for example, you and I worked on this, but we sponsored soccer teams for asylum-seeking youth in New York. Came up with that plan, thought it was great. It was going to benefit the kids. The press around that would benefit Hummel. Us working with Hummel would open up a new price point and a new community to sell to. So I presented the idea to Hummel. They loved it. And it was kind of like this triad of things that worked. And they worked from a business perspective because we did good sales and the retailers loved the story. And it worked from a humanitarian perspective because, these guys got hooked up with cool uniforms and they got a cool video made. And, it's just cool all the way around. So when I do brand collaborations like that, that's how I like to approach it. And it's been really successful and I love it. And then working with Kanye has been just a terrific opportunity that has resulted from, actually just from my own work and doing my thing and my own presentations and him taking notice. And so he reached out and, for the past couple of years, we've been doing stuff together and it's been, a fantastic opportunity. And, it's not just the opportunity to work with him, but it kind of reminds me of the fact that when you have your own brand, you have to keep doors open and you have to keep doing other things. So as much as you're focused on your own business, sometimes you might need to get another job, and it's not the end of the world if you have to do that. It could be, you could be 5 years into it and maybe business is just taking a little slump, or you want to put more money into this part of the business and you need to get a job elsewhere. And that's just part of the whole growth of having a business. And the way I see it is you measure your success differently along the way. It's important to identify what success is to you, but I know that at this point I'm successful because I'm doing what I love and I'm doing things that are good and I'm able to employ people and I love the work that I do. But I still have other goals. I still have other things that I need to do to fully express myself creatively.
That's what's up. So everybody, just a reminder, we're going to be doing some audience questions in a few minutes. So if you have any questions, you can just throw them into the chat and we'll get to them in a second. But Willy, I wanted to ask you in regards to being political and being socially conscious in your work and putting your identity into it so much. it seems like there was a time in fashion when people would have looked at that as being a kiss of death or something that, should ultimately be avoided. What have you found by following your own pathway and embracing your own, family history, your own cultural community history, and your own politics and ideas? What sort of benefit and positivity have you found from taking that risk?
I think that it's very important to realize yourself, and to, no matter what your background, really no matter what your background, if you realize the good in yourself and the qualities that you have to offer, you can draw from those and make something beautiful. And if you can, realize that sincerity in yourself and pursue that in what you do, that can be one of the best things you can do. And just truly believe in what you do, and keep pushing for it. And yeah.
Yeah. So we're looking at an election coming up next week, and you've used your platform to, kind of motivate and advocate people to vote. I'm just wondering, any thoughts you have about where we're headed in the
Oh
next,
my
the next
God.
year?
Serious? Oh no. Um, well, I think whatever happens, we are going to have to work more diligently for towards truth, and towards kindness, and towards love, and toward human dignity. The good thing about the last, these shitty years we've had and months we've had, is that so many more people have discovered that. And, we're very heightened to that awareness. So I think that no matter what happens, we have to stay on point. It's going to be, if Biden wins, there's still going to be a lot of work to do. It's not going to be just like everything's great. Definitely not. So I just think that, we all have to remember that. And in everything we do, any kind of work we do, we have the opportunity to push that message forward.
Absolutely. Definitely. That's super, super real, everybody. So make sure, if you haven't already, definitely go out and cast a vote, cast a ballot.
Most definitely.
Yeah. To switch over to some of these audience questions, we got one from Dorothy, who asked, "Hello, Willy. My question for you is, how did you get to a point where you were taken serious as an intern? I know many internships make interns do small things that don't relate to the internship, like picking up coffee. So how did you break that barrier of letting the company know you're here to learn the trade rather than be used as free labor? What advice would you give someone getting into internship who wants to avoid being taken advantage of?"
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, if you're in a position where you feel like you're being taken advantage of, you should definitely let somebody know, whether it's a supervisor or your school, because I know that happens. But at the same time, as an intern, you have to remember that whatever you're doing there, you're going to be learning something from that experience. Like I mentioned, I was literally emptying my boss's ashtray, and I remember he broke his leg one time. He's probably on this call somewhere, but he broke his leg one time, and for like 6 months I had to like haul all his stuff around and like help him walk around and stuff. But when I look back on that experience, I learned so much from that. I really, even though at the time maybe I didn't realize I was learning that much, I was drinking it all in. So sometimes I guess we just have to remember that, like, an internship isn't. Sometimes it sucks, but you got to stick with it. But if you do think that you're being run ragged for no reason, you should definitely mention it.
Yeah. Brent Morales says, "Como estás, Willy? I'm Puerto Rican, and I believe there's a communal aspect to being Hispanic. Could you highlight other Hispanic creatives and collaboration with other Hispanic designers / creatives that you have participated in?"
Yeah, I mean, there's a brilliant photographer named Carlos Jaramillo. He's Mexican, and he does a lot of kind of uh, documentary style photography. So like things happening and animals, and he's really really good. And I did a project with him that I plan on doing another project with him with this Dickies thing that I'm working on. But he took these incredible photos of drivers all throughout New York City, like delivering food and just those Monday morning drivers. And he shot with a really amazing camera. He shot at a long distance, so these guys were just in their own headspace and driving these trucks, and they're the most beautiful romantic shots. And we screen printed those on these big giant tees, and we sold them to Dover Street Market, and that was incredible. CarlosJaramillo.com. You should check out his work. He's great. And if there was something you wanted to collab with him, I would just reach out. That's something also that I found is that in this digital age, all the young guys probably already know this already, but I mean, it's so easy to just reach out to somebody on Instagram or whatever, start exchanging ideas, and before you know it, you're doing something. I mean, that's essentially what happened with me and Kanye. He literally just called me up and it happened. I actually learned that from him. Just call people up if you're interested.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
That's what's up. Thanks,
Thank
Brent.
you.
Joe asked, can you talk about how you ended up living in Copenhagen? And do you see yourself staying there or coming back to NYC?
Yeah, man. So I came out here with my husband. He got a job out here, and we decided to move. I mean, he actually got the job because we were both really exhausted from, working crazy people in New York for so long. And we started thinking, oh, let's try Europe, And so we kind of put it out there, and then it happened. We came out here, didn't know if it was going to be for a year or what. And it ended up being really, really nice. It's got the government system here is very much about supporting the community. So you pay really high taxes, but you get awesome free medical. People get paid to go to college. If you have a baby while you're working, you get a year off. It's that kind of society. It's really nice, and it's beautiful. Aesthetically, it's beautiful. So we've been here about 5 years, and I've been just going back and forth between New York and here because it's a direct flight. It's really easy. And I think that we probably will come back to New York. New York is like home, and even with all its downfalls and even with the craziness that's going on right now, it's like it feels like home. So yeah, I think eventually I will come back to New York.
That's awesome. And Ryan Jones, who's a friend of mine, he asked, what other brands and artists are inspiring you most today?
Okay, let's see. Well, it's funny. I've had my eye on like more relaxed kind of tailored menswear lately, which is really different than I've been looking at for a while. It's kind of like veering far from streetwear, and a lot of the brands I've been looking at it's like there's a brand called Hansen out of Denmark. You might want to check out. It looks very conservative, but the product itself is beautifully tailored, and the fits are a little bit more relaxed. A lot of Japanese influence. And there's a brand called Teotora out of Japan that is really beautiful silhouettes. Everything's black. Everything's made out of these incredible tech nylons. and it's suiting, you know, it's like suiting and top coats. It's this merge of technical fabrics into tailored craftsmanship, and it looks great. I also like North Face Purple Label right now coming out of Japan. You know, I think there's this. For me, it's kind of like this new love for good craftsmanship and really nice things that you're gonna wear all the time, and less about like crazy fashion, like a sweater with 3 arms and all that stuff. You know, I'm just like, no more of that. It was fun while it lasted, but you know, let's be serious. Also, the mood of things, you know, the mood of the country and the mood of the world. It's more like we just want some nice clothes that we feel comfortable in. We don't want to be flashy or silly or overly like joyful. We just want to be like real.
I definitely feel that. From Jordan, she says, or they say, as someone who was wanting to start her own business, what are some tips from you about funding your business? How did you fund your fashion brand?
Okay. Well, I actually jumped into it without knowing how much money it was going to cost. So it was a little tough for me. If I was going to do it over, I would say make sure you have like a nice bulk of money before you go into it. And it also depends on what you're going to do. Like, I think it's a good idea to start small and not necessarily do a full collection. This is if you don't have any money. Don't do a full collection. Do just a couple of key pieces, because now it's almost more about selling something nice and beautiful and singular rather than a full explosion of stuff. You know, it's almost like the story of a widget. You know, if you have a good, great thing, you can really feature that good, great thing, whether it's a coat or a hoodie. It could be like the best hoodie in the world, like a beautiful, beautiful hoodie. And you focus on that, and it will cost you less. You'll need less money to put into that. And, you know, it could end up gaining you more attention than shelling out a bunch of money for a big collection. But, you know, there are ways to go about getting funding. You get a partner, and you can put together a business plan and share that with you know, people that could give you money. But when you're starting out, I think it's good to really protect yourself and protect your own brand until you learn more and more and more, and then you build your brand a little bit better and better and even more valuable, and then get the money. So, you know, start out with a savings, do little by little, and build it up that way. That's what I would say.
That's awesome. And we're going to do 2 more from the audience. One is from a friend of mine, Austin Young, who said, "Hey, Willy, I'm a big fan. I own the Mayhem jacket of yours, one of my favorite pieces. I was curious what the background of that particular piece was. Thanks for all your work."
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm really glad you have that jacket. That's one of my favorite pieces. So that, if you don't know the artist Brian Calvin, you should check him out. He's pretty amazing. And he actually, I met him in high school when I moved from that small town to that slightly larger town in California. And he was like this grungy little white kid. I think he was like 3 years younger than me. And for some reason, we like took a liking to each other. And I knew this kid was like genius. And then we used to like listen to Duran Duran together and draw pictures and do like weird stuff. And I never saw him after high school. And then later he turned into this famous artist. And I reached out to him at one of his galleries. I drew him a little picture because we used to draw together. And now he's making a fortune off these drawings. And we got back in touch with each other, and, you know, I said, I'm doing this. And he had just done something for Raf Simons. He did sweaters using his art for Raf Simons. And I was like, you know, we should do a collaboration about Visalia, the town we were in. So we did that collaboration, called it Visalia. And all of the artwork was a combination of our own little paintings. and it was a story about like vices being so valuable when you're in a community of uh, like uh, like a community where that you just don't want to be in. Basically, like this mundane suburban community. So we did like the cigarette packs that said Mayhem and a Coors Light logo that said Cares. And yeah, that's the story behind it.
That's awesome. Here's one from Evan. They wonder, what would you recommend to students in choosing a college major or minor when they want to pursue fashion, but they also want to pursue other career goals?
Well, I think, if you want to pursue fashion, I think you could start with fashion, because once you start going to college, you start learning all of this stuff about what is out there and what you might want to do and what you might not want to do. You might start pursuing fashion and find out, oh, I like, advertising, or I like drama, but you really won't know that until you start getting the wheels in motion in college. So if you've already got it in your head that you have an interest in fashion, I think that's a great thing to major in right away. That's my answer.
And I had one more for you, kind of, and this just came to me, thinking so much about fashion and style history, like Chicano culture, queer culture have always been influential in the way people dress and influencing popular culture, but they don't necessarily always get the credit and the acknowledgement. What does it feel like to be bringing the art and the style and the things that you're bringing forth from your identity, and also representing it as it is, as a Chicano man, as a queer identifying man, bringing these works into light?
Yeah, it's a great privilege to have the ability, to have selected a creative path or a career path that allows me this kind of expression. And it says a lot about our world too, that things have evolved in a way that I'm allowed to do this. I mean, we've seen this throughout the years, throughout the history of fashion. Fashion and media has always had such an impact on the way people think. Even in the 70s, when you think about when people of color were first on television for commercials and things like that. And then when the first Black designers were designing and getting on the runway, it really started to make people think differently, started to make the public see things differently. And that was in the 70s, and it was only this much of a little move forward, but things are faster now, things are harder now, things are more in your face now, and there's a whole new slew of talent rising. All of you young students are the next generation of what is to be, and the voices that you have and that we have are just waiting to be heard. And whatever creative platform you choose, or whatever platform you choose, that's an opportunity to make change in the world through your own artistic or your own self-expression. It's really a beautiful, beautiful, cool thing.
That's what's up. Thank you so much, Willy, for enlightening us and taking some time and just sharing, what you've been doing in your career, and the sort of obstacles and also the awesome things that have happened along the way. It's been really, really great. And thank you, everybody, for joining in and also making those donations, because they're going to some really, really dope places. So we really appreciate that.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you all tuning in. It's great to see your faces.